evaluation, and Karen's putting that in the chat, so that you can get a certificate. If you want credits, we are offering credits for the training. And we want to make sure that we hear back from you if there are other topics of things that you would like to learn about, especially as we're tackling being trauma-informed and being resilient. How can we actually do that in our work, in our basically at home, and in our community? So self-care is one of the things that we can really start with. So if we are taking care of ourselves, we actually can help others in our work, wherever we are. So it's really important to start with self-care. And we're also encouraging everyone, if you want to, you can go back to the recording. We are recording all of our sessions. And so Karen will also put that link in the chat, making sure that people know that they can go back to the recording. If they have any questions, they can review it. And we hope at the end of the session today, we'll have a little bit of time for questions. You can put them in the chat, and Karen and I will actually be looking for your questions, and hopefully we can engage you and have some time to talk about some of the questions that you have on the topic today. So we are pleased to welcome Emily. Emily is a second-year doctoral student at the University of Illinois at Urbana-Champaign. Her research interests focus on the benefits of physical activity and fitness in improving cognitive function across the lifespan. She is also interested in studying the intertwined contributions of physical activity and sedentary behavior to overall health. Emily actually comes from California, but she spent quite a bit of her time, in Illinois. And so we want to welcome her and thank her so much for being with us today. And I'm going to turn it over to Emily and have her tell you a little bit about herself, and then she will begin her presentation. So thank you, Emily, for being with us today.
Hi, thank you so much for that introduction. Yes, as I was just introduced, my name is Emily, and I am so excited to be discussing with you today about how to move your way to a brighter day, looking at how exercise can combat stress, anxiety, and depression. So as this is a self-care series, one of the most easily accessible free ways of self-care is exercise. And we'll explore just the amazing ways of how exercise and physical activity can combat stress, anxiety, and depression, which are sadly all too relevant in today's society. So a little bit about me. I'm from San Diego, California, so kind of a leap out here to Illinois. I received my bachelor's in neurobiology, physiology, and behavior from the University of California, Davis, and my master's of science in kinesiology from UIUC. And I'm currently a PhD student in the same lab, the exercise psychology lab here. And as was introduced, my research interests are I'm really interested in not just studying physical activity, but the whole daily profile. So physical activity and sedentary behavior, and that affects our overall health and well-being. And in my free time, I'm an avid triathlete and devoted ice cream connoisseur. So I have those two things to kind of balance each other out there. So before we get started, I just want to give a disclaimer when talking about stress, anxiety, depression. I'm not a doctor, especially a medical doctor. In 2 years, I'll hopefully be a doctor of philosophy, but I'm not trying to provide medical advice. And if you have any medical health condition, do please seek appropriate help. Stress, anxiety, and depression in this topic today in my presentation will be really boiled down to the most simplest explanations, but they are very complex. There are so many factors that contribute to them, and there are so many ways in that they can be treated. So again, this is a very simplified version, but they are very multifaceted. And one of my favorite quotes that I just kind of want to kick off is that it's okay to have feelings of stress, anxiety, and depression. As Stephen Hawking had said, one of the most basic rules of the universe is that nothing is perfect. Perfection simply just doesn't exist. Without imperfection, neither you or I would exist. So that's all just being a part of being human, is fluctuating in our feelings, and then just learning how to work with them, control them, to live our best lives. The key learning objectives today, we're first going to be defining what stress, anxiety, and depression is. One of my big approaches to research and teaching is to not just discuss on the surface about defining what these topics are, but really gain understanding about physiologically what is happening to our bodies in these three states. Examining primary components of anxiety, understanding what happens to our bodies when we feel stressed and anxious. And with that understanding, I think that we can better then understand how exercise can help combat these feelings and help alleviate them. Lastly, we'll get into depression, how exercise can help with depression, and then end the topic, or excuse me, end the presentation with practical recommendations to start exercising. So to kind of kick us off, if you all want to put in the chat, what do you feel better when you feel stressed, anxious, or depressed? What are some things that you like to do? I encourage you to put in the chat. Again, there's no right or wrong answers at all. Take a walk, pray, deep breaths, hike, read, hike, walking, listen to music and breathe, go for a walk, artwork, tapping. Oh, I did tap dancing. Lay down, work my perennial gardens, eat, sleep, listen to music, ice cream, yes. I love all those answers, and they are all very awesome. Journaling, ooh, that's a good one too. Well, thank you all so much for putting that in. So first, let's start with some definitions to kind of gain a platform for understanding. So stress is a state of disharmony or threat to homeostasis. And homeostasis is really just this fancy word for balance and equilibrium. Our bodies, just like everything in the universe, are in a state of balance. That's why we have internal regulators to regulate our body temperature, our fluid balance, our hunger levels. So our bodies like to be in this state of balance. When we perceive a threat, our body experiences physiological changes, which increase our alertness, our focus, and our energy to address that threat and combat it so that we can get back to a state of balance. However, stress happens when the perceived demands of what we're experiencing exceed our perceived resources, and we'll discuss that a little bit more later. So stress is really a physiological response, where anxiety is more about how we perceive that response and cognitively approach it. So anxiety is specifically an emotion characterized by feelings of worry, thoughts, and physical changes that may occur in the absence of an actual stressor. And that's one of the key components that we'll get back to when we discuss anxiety more in depth. And lastly, depression is a mood disorder that causes severe symptoms which affect how we think, feel, and handle activities. And as we'll see, depression is much more than just a feeling of sadness. So why do we have this stress response system? So we're going to go back a couple, many thousands of years ago to when humans had just two basic functions: when we rest and we were active. We were active in order to survive and pass on our genes, and we rested so that we can resources so that we can continue to be active and pass on our genes. Again, that's when our bodies with that very simple homeostasis. However, the stress response system in our body is shaped by natural selection to adjust physiological processes and behavior to changing circumstances. Naturally makes sense. Back in a long time ago, whoever survives being eaten gets to pass on their survival genes. So whoever was able to outrun the threats, such as the saber-tooth tiger, or anything like that.
Well, these are antiques, but they're still working.
They were able to on their survival genes.
And I know the new system's going to cost.
Sorry to interrupt, but could Karen please turn off her audio? Karen, would you mind turning off your audio, please?
I'll just continue on.
Wow.
So anyways, natural selection shape mechanisms that adjust the threshold and the magnitude of our stress responses as a function to prior experiences. So as you can see in the top right-hand corner, there's a really common diagram that's often posed called the inverted U hypothesis. And that talks about inner stress responses in our stress response,
Yes, build a building down there.
arousal and
Don't know
some
much.
level of stress is actually good and provides an optimal level of alertness to respond to the stress. You know, think about if you were a cave person, you saw
Yeah, they're just.
saber-toothed
they
tiger
won't
coming
even
at you.
move, so.
Having a low level of arousal, not really responding, not really caring, not really mobilizing resources, probably not going to end well. And having too high of an arousal level means that you are so wired up and so alert that you really can't think clearly and you can't perform at the best. So that's why having just this moderate level of arousal is really the best for performance. And this is how, over natural selection, over evolution, our bodies form this stress response system. So when we talk about stress, there's actually two types of stress characterized. There's acute and chronic stress. Acute stress is a single bout of stress. And this is often a part of everyday life. I'm sure many of you, myself a lot, experience these single bouts of acute stress that are triggered by an immediate threat of situation, and once gone, stress subsides. So whether that's a deadline that we all of a sudden have to meet, or we're running late to a meeting, or let's say we have to slam on the brakes as we're driving. Stressful situation happens, but as soon as that subsides, once we meet the deadline, once we make it on time to the meeting, once we pass the car that almost hit us, we're able to calm down and resume back to homeostasis. And this is really what our bodies are meant to adapt to and respond to. And that's why we have these really responsive systems that can help us adapt appropriately to that. Then there's chronic stress, and this is due to repeated exposure of a perceived threat. So this could be, say, job stress, financial worries, health concerns. Constantly our bodies are under this stress of a situation. And this is what really wears down our body and our mind. As our stress response systems are constantly activated, our bodies are constantly in this alert, aroused state. And this is what causes those significant health problems that you often see associated with stress. So when we're stressed, there's kind of a time or a series of things that our bodies go through. And some of these steps happen very, very quickly. So first, our bodies experience a stressor. It could be an external stressor, some situation that we see or that is happening to us, or it can be an internal stressor. And this is more cognitively when we experience fear, panic, or stress. So it can be one or both. These aren't mutually exclusive. But when our body experiences some sort of a stressor, we go into this primary appraisal stage where we assess the situation as important or demanding. Again, in our everyday lives, we are constantly being flooded with stimuli. We're seeing things, observing things, thinking things. And most of the time, our bodies are very good about just kind of filtering them out and recognizing what is important, what needs to be dealt with immediately. So in a stressful situation, let's say I'm making up a completely, probably very unlikely example. You're walking down the street and there's a tiger just sitting in the road. Your body will see that and recognize that, hey, this tiger in the middle of the road, one, it's very unusual, and two, probably not going to end well if you don't react quickly. So this is a situation that is important and demanding and needs resources to be shuttled to handle that. Then your body enters the secondary appraisal, which can happen very quickly. It assesses your resources to cope with the situation. So for example, you see a hungry tiger in the middle of the street, your body, this is all happening very, very quickly, assesses what are your resources to cope with the situation. Part of this can be from previous experiences. As your body decides, is it best? Can you run? Can you jump in a tree? Can you get in a car? Just what are your options to handle this response, to handle this stressful situation? And then this resistance, this is what activates your stress hormone pathways. And in the resistance stage, this is when the stressor may be resolved. So hypothetically, let's say that you decide to run away from the tiger into the nearest building. You're in the building, you're safe, stressor is resolved. And in acute stress, that story could just end right there. But if we are constantly under this repeated state of stress, and we're constantly exposed to the stressor, our bodies may progress into the stage of exhaustion. And this is where the demands of stress exceeds our ability to adapt. And our body's resources to respond to this stress can no longer compensate for the stressor. We cannot react appropriately. Our bodies can't handle this. And this is what results in health problems. So again, to kind of break down even more so to the physiology of what happens. As I said, first thing is our body experiences a stressor. our body sees a stressor, and instantly seeing that stressor kickstarts to our brains that, hey, there is a situation that we need to deal with ASAP. And the hypothalamus is this region in the brain that's really your body's stress response center. It's from when you see a stressor, that message gets sent to the hypothalamus that says we need to trigger this stress response. And it activates what's called the HPA axis, the hypothalamus pituitary axis. So this is really the pathway of what's going on here. Our body is designed to redirect its resources to combat the stressor. And hormones are how the regions within the body communicate to each other. Slightly off topic, but not quite. Our bodies have so many different systems that, of course, have so many different functions, and yet they all work together to keep us in homeostasis and keep us working. And hormones are really the key way that different organs of our body, different regions of our body can communicate to each other about what they're seeing, what their experience is, and how these other organs of the body should adapt to that. So as I said, you see a stressor, and those optical images fire to the hypothalamus. The hypothalamus sends a hormone to the anterior pituitary gland, which is another region in the brain. Again, that sends another hormone to the adrenal cortex, which is actually further down your body, right around your kidneys. And the adrenal cortex, which is right around the kidneys, that is what produces cortisol, which many of you may have heard that. That is your body's primary stress response hormone. So once that hormone is produced, that gets sent out to all these different parts of your body to prepare your body to handle the stressor. And it has a lot of different functions, from stopping unnecessary bodily processes that aren't necessary to respond to the stressor, and activate more necessary processes that'll prepare your body. And one of the key things in how our bodies are so amazingly designed is that we have what's called a negative feedback loop, so that when the stress passes, our body knows to stop producing cortisol. So again, it's all coming about starting in the brain. When our brain indicates and knows that the stress is past, let's say the tiger is gone, we've met the deadline, etc. Once that is passed, it communicates to the rest of the body to say, we don't need this cortisol anymore. Cortisol gets lower, the anterior pituitary glands in the body and the hypothalamus recognize that there's lower cortisol, says that, hey, we can stop producing these other hormones, and it shuts itself down. And this is how our bodies are designed to respond to stress and get back to normal, respond to stress and get back to normal. However, constant activation of this stress response system and these high constant levels of cortisol is what can really increase your risk for anxiety and depression. As I said, once stress happens, it communicates to all these different systems in our body. And all of these 5 key systems, the 5 primary systems in our body, all have a role in our stress response. So we'll kind of go through one by one about what happens to our body when we experience stress. So first, the musculoskeletal system. So what happens when we're stressed is that our muscles tense, and that's one of our body's reflexes to stress. And naturally, it's how our body prepares to guard against injury and pain. We tense up to prepare for some sort of impact. Under acute stress, let's say, you have a deadline or you're very nervous about a presentation, your muscles will tense up all at once. So that's why, jaw aches, headaches, back aches, etc. Muscular aches are really common when people have, the high bouts of acute stress. Again, as soon as that acute stress bout passes, most of the time we tend to go back to normal and we feel better. But under chronic stress, such as, chronic job stress, for example, our muscles are constantly tensing up and releasing over long periods of time. And this is what can contribute to headaches and migraines and tension in our shoulders, neck, head. This can contribute to some serious musculoskeletal pain in your lower back and upper extremities. I talk about job stress because that's really one of the most prevalent types of chronic stress that a lot of adults experience. Next, with the respiratory system, and that is the system which is responsible for bringing in oxygen to our body and expelling carbon dioxide. What happens when we're stressed is our respiratory system ramps up. Need to quickly distribute oxygen throughout the body to prepare against a threat. And stress can cause shortness of breath and rapid breathing. Again, I'm sure everyone has in some point of life felt, a moment of a stressful situation, whether it be external or internal, and all of a sudden you just start to feel like your breath picking up and you can't catch your breath. That's because the body is preparing to get more oxygen to the body. Oxygen is a key molecule for our body's metabolism and to be able to break down, metabolize nutrients and resources so that we can respond quickly. Under acute stress, our blood flow can increase an estimated 300 to 400% throughout the body. So really picking up. Again, blood is the primary transport vessel through our body for oxygen to transport from the lungs to all the different parts of your body. Your heartbeat will faster naturally to get that oxygen moving. And people without respiratory disease, their body can manage this additional work to breathe comfortably. People without respiratory disease, they can handle this increase in respiration. Stress passes back to homeostasis, everything is fine. However, people with pre-existing respiratory diseases, even this acute stress can really make breathing problems worse. And with chronic stress, with having your blood flow increase and your heart being faster, this can lead to increased blood pressure, an overworked heart, and just overall put extensive stress on our lungs. Next, we go to the cardiovascular system. The cardiovascular system and respiratory system really do work closely together, since the heart is responsible for pumping that oxygenated blood to all of your cells in the body and removing carbon dioxide and other waste from the cells out. So under stress, the heart and the blood vessels are responsible for coordinating the body's response system. The blood is responsible for transporting both cortisol and oxygen to all your different cells. The hormones flow through the bloodstream, oxygen is transported to your cells, and this in turn is because of that increase in heart rate, stronger contractions of our heart muscles. Our heart contracts stronger to push blood further to get throughout the body. Under acute stress, our blood vessels that direct the blood to our large muscles in the heart, they actually dilate, so they get bigger, so that again, more blood can flow through these vessels. By increasing the amount of blood pumped to these parts of the body, we see temporary elevation of blood pressure. But as with all these systems, once the stress episode passes, our bodies will return to their normal state. Under chronic stress, we kind of lose that normal state. So you do see long-term problems in the heart and blood vessels. This can really contribute to an increased risk in hypertension, heart attack, and stroke. And that's where it gets really serious. Our endocrine system, this is a lesser known system that we might not hear about a lot. And this is really the primary system for producing our body's hormones. We have tons and tons of hormones that serve so many different functions throughout the body. But the really relevant ones to our stress response system is cortisol. So under stress, we increase our cortisol production. We also increase that adrenaline production, and that's what activates that fight or flight response, which I'm sure many of you have heard about. When we're under stress, our bodies are either going to fight or flight, run or fight. And then we also see glucocorticoids, which regulate the immune system and reduce inflammation. And our immune system actually becomes important to the stress response system, as we talk about in a little bit. So under acute stress, our bodies see an increased blood sugar and promotion of energy metabolism, because under that body's stress response system, one of the key roles of cortisol is to tell the body, hey, we're going to respond, we're going to get into action. So we need to increase the blood sugar so that we can get nutrients in our blood so that we can burn energy so that we can perform. We also see suppression of non-essential bodily functions, and that non-essential as in not essential to dealing with the stress. So that's the immune system, digestive, our reproductive system, and our growth systems primarily. Increased blood flow to our muscles, again, as our body is preparing to act, and dilated pupils so that we can really just get in more visual information. But under chronic stress and this chronic suppression of these non-essential functions, as you can imagine, it can be really detrimental. And that is why you'll see lots of times lower impacted immune systems can go hand in hand with high stress, or you might feel digestion issues or stomach aches, which will actually get to the next slide. Chronically high adrenaline levels, again, also lead to high blood pressure, anxiety, heart damage, and we see impaired communication between the immune system and the HPA axis. And we have the gastrointestinal system, which again, that is our body's digestive system. So when we're actually experiencing a stressor, our body does not view digestion as an essential function. That's really not the thing it's going to worry about right now. That's not how it's going to use its resources. So when we feel acute stress, that's why we feel this pain, bloating, other gut discomfort, because the body redirects oxygenated blood also away from the stomach. It stops digestion. This can really affect our appetite. Also too, the reason why we feel these butterflies in our stomach is when we're nervous and stressed is because there is this constant communication between the brain and the gut. And that is really important for numerous health reasons. It can also have a really big impact on our mental states. But back to the acute stress, again, I said our digestion is slowed, our nutrient absorption is negatively affected because that's also not a key function that our bodies deem important during stress. Under chronic stress, stress associated with changes in that gut bacteria, which can really influence mood. And there's a lot of emerging resources about how important our gut bacteria is to a range of our body's functions. Acute stress itself and chronic stress too might lead individuals to just eat poor diets. A lot of times, when we're stressed, we choose maybe not the most healthiest options. And again, under a bout of acute stress, our body is very resilient. It can handle that. But under chronic stress and chronically, resorting to poor diets, that can also really affect mood deterioration and how your stomach feels. And lastly, we see a weakened intestinal barrier as our gut bacteria enters the body. Our gut bacteria is great and very important when it stays in the gut. But when it starts to leak out to other parts of the body, into the bloodstream, that's where it can have some really bad health consequences. So now we have a really good understanding about what stress is. And stress is, again, our body's physiological response to a perceived threat. And anxiety is kind of the next step up from stress. So it's defined as persistent excessive worries that don't go away even in the absence of a stressor. And that's really the key thing. So stress is, again, back to the tiger in the street example. Stress is you walking down the street, you see a tiger, stressful situation, you respond, move on. But anxiety is, let's say you're constantly anxious that there will be a tiger. You're anxious about what you're going to see crossing the street and if there's going to be something, even though really there is no actual stressor happening. Anxiety can lead to nearly identical sets of symptoms as stress. So sometimes you might hear people use them interchangeably because oftentimes when we feel anxious or stressed, they might feel they're happening in very interchangeable situations. But the key thing is that anxiety is actually an emotion, which is characterized by feelings of tension, worried thoughts, and physical changes like increased blood pressure, sweating, trembling, dizziness, or rapid heartbeat. And again, chronic anxiety can lead to depression. So it can be very simple and very easy to say that stress can cause anxiety, anxiety can lead to depression. And while in a simple case that can happen, I do want to emphasize as well that it's not just this very nice linear pattern, and that anxiety, stress, and depression can all happen independently. One doesn't necessarily have to happen to lead to the other. So it's unfortunately not as easy as it sounds, but in a way, yes, in situations, chronic anxiety can lead us to depression. So there's 6 different key components of anxiety disorder. And again, they all have this common theme of feeling stress and worried when there really is actually no immediate threat. Most common when we think of anxiety is generalized anxiety disorder. And these disorders are all actually diagnosable conditions. So we might all feel anxious from time to time. I know I certainly feel anxious in day-to-day, feeling anxious about this presentation, about work I have to do, constantly worried about what if. But our day-to-day anxiety, which many people feel, there's a step up, which is actually diagnosable conditions, which we're talking about here. So generalized anxiety disorder is chronic anxiety, which is exaggerated for your attention, again, when there's nothing to provoke it. And the key thing with this condition is that worry most days for at least 6 months. 6 months of feeling restless, wound up, on edge, fatigued, having difficulty concentrating, being irritable, muscle tension, sleep problems. Next, we get to post-traumatic stress disorder, or PTSD. So this is a sense of anxiety, which people might often experience when they have been exposed to an actual terrifying event or ordeal, which really did cause them great physical harm, or they really were threatened. However, they might experience such anxiety and stress well after that actual event, and while there really is no actual physical harm that's about to happen to them. Next is obsessive compulsive disorder. So this is, many of you probably heard of this, recurrent unwanted thoughts or obsessions or repeated behaviors that if a person does not perform some action or does not do something, they get very anxious and uptight. I don't know how many of you have seen Monk. That's one of my favorite TV shows. That's a really common example of someone who does have OCD. And that, again, if they feel like if they don't touch the doorknob when they leave, that something will happen, even though they know, truthfully, Mr. Monk knows that nothing really will happen, but they're in their mind, they are very uneasy unless that does happen. Next is panic disorder. And that's recurrent unexpected panic attacks, which are defined as intense fear, which can come on very quickly and reach peaks, which again, the theme of anxiety, they occur unexpectedly or can be brought upon by a trigger, such as a feared object or situation where again, no threat might actually occur. Phobia-related disorders, so arachnophobia, one of the most common ones I think of right off the bat, is an intense fear or aversion to specific objects, situations. In arachnophobia, people have a terrifying fear of spiders. Blanking on the name, but I know there's a phobia, one of my favorites, of having peanut butter on the roof of your mouth. So there's lots of different types of phobias, where people are very afraid of one situation or object. But again, spiders, peanut butter on the roof of your mouth, many of these phobias, that if you see these things or experience it, there's no actual danger. But regardless, the fear is out of proportion to the actual danger caused by the situation or object. And last thing we're talking about is social anxiety disorder. And this is characterized by overwhelming anxiety and excessive self-conscious in everyday social situations. So when we discuss anxiety, there's really three primary components. So the first is our thoughts. Perceptions or thoughts that revolve around themes of danger, physical, mental, or social, threat, or vulnerability. So really getting in our heads and our thoughts about worrying about, what people think, what's going on in the situation, what's going to happen to me. We really get lost in our thoughts. And a lot of this, I am speaking from personal experience. I do experience anxiety like quite a lot. And so, you get lost in your thoughts and they really start to weigh you down. We experience physical sensations. So you might feel rapid breathing, dizzy, chest pain, upset stomach, or nausea, sweating, numbness, tingling, quick heart rate. So all of these are physical sensations, again, because our body is reacting to this perception of a threat. Our bodies don't know the difference really between if there actually is a threat or there is in real life. Our bodies just really do what our brain tells us to do. The last of components is behaviors and cognitive processes. So this is when we're anxious, we might feel hypervigilant, irritable, or restless, or kind of on the opposite, lack of concentration, racing thoughts, unwanted thoughts. So that really affects our behaviors and the cognitive processes. So now that we have a really deep understanding of stress and anxiety, probably the most exciting part of this talk is how can exercise be helpful to this? And before I move on to really talking about, how exercise can help with stress and anxiety, I would like to kind of give a little bit of a background about how did we arrive to these scientific answers? How do we know this? And I work in the exercise psychology lab as part of my degree. So my whole field of research is exercise research. And there are two primary approaches when researchers want to study the relationship between exercise and stress or anxiety. And a lot of this I do day to day. So the first is observational research. So researchers might go out into the field and they'll ask people about their exercise habits and their feelings of stress and anxiety. And they'll see if there's a relationship between these responses. So this is a lot of looking at correlations. One of the key things with all observational research that you've probably heard over and over, correlation does not equal causation. So while observational research can be a quick and easy way to see a relationship, it's very difficult to determine if one thing is actually causing the other. And this is where intervention studies are really valuable. While they do take more time and resources, they get at the root of, is exercise causing a reduction in stress and anxiety? And in these type of studies, researchers will recruit a sample of people and they typically randomize them into about two groups. One of these groups will receive an exercise intervention. They'll do some type of exercise for a certain amount of time, certain frequency. And the other group is a control group that isn't necessarily receiving that exercise exposure. After that intervention, the research team will examine the group differences and see if the exercise group did change stress and anxiety above and beyond the control group. So really with all of these ways and how we are able to talk about the 4 ways exercise can help stress and anxiety, all of this information comes from that previous type of research that I just discussed about. And as I just said, there's 4 key ways that exercise can help. So first, exercise is a physical stressor. So as I had said at the very beginning, you know, our bodies have a certain threshold that we respond to a stress system. And then we go back to normal. And constantly activating that stress system and going back to normal, up and down, can really be exhausting. However, exercise itself is a physical stressor because it really just activates the same systems as responding to an external threat. When you exercise, we experience an increase in heart rate, increase in blood pressure, increased level of cortisol. Our body is under physical stress. And just like we train our muscles to be stronger, and over time our muscles become stronger, we can handle heavier loads. That's the same thing with exercise in our body stress system, is that through this healthy weight training or through this healthy activation of our stress systems, physical exercise may produce beneficial adaptations as our stress response systems become more able to better respond to acute stresses more effectively. So with reduced vigor and shorter durations, because our body is like a strong muscle, we're able to handle this better. Next, exercise can positively affect chemical levels, especially in our brain. So when our body does experience a stress, it produces hormones epinephrine, norepinephrine, and cortisol. As I've talked about these are involved in preparing the body to react to and prepare for a challenge. And exercises really can play a role in regulating the body's productions of these to control the overall stress response. And exercise also affects neurotransmitters. Those are the chemicals in our brain that actually have our brain communicate to other regions, or different brain regions can communicate to each other, such as dopamine and serotonin. You might have heard of these. These are often referred to as the happy chemicals. So these are chemicals that are often associated with and cause feelings of mood, pleasure, reward. So exercise can really positively upregulate these chemicals as well. That might often be, you might hear of the runner's high is a really kind of a common phrase that you might hear. Thirdly, exercise can positively affect our behaviors. So research has shown that a regular exercise can improve self-esteem, and it can improve your perception of yourself, your skills, your qualities, and just how you overall feel about yourself. And having high health self-esteem is actually really important for overall health and well-being. It's linked with happiness and satisfaction. And also people with higher self-esteem are less susceptible to physiological problems such as anxiety and depression. Another key thing is that regular exercise positively affects your confidence or self-efficacy. Self-efficacy is your confidence in your ability to handle a situation. And it is very situation specific, but overall people with higher self-efficacy just feel less stressed and less worked up when they are approached the situation, likely because they've done this before, they know how to handle the situation, they've seen people who are like them who've handled this situation, and just approaching the situation with more confidence really kind of reduces your body's stress response because your body's not as stressed. It's not as worked up. It already knows what the resources are needed to deal with it. And as I said, this is an important component during the appraisal stage. So when your body is appraising a situation, deciding how threatening it is, again, if it's a situation that you're confident in, it might not really be that threatening to you. The fourth reason is exercise can be positive distraction. So there is such thing as the timeout hypothesis. Exercise can take a break from your stress and worries. So let's say hypothetically, for example, you have a very stressful job, and taking 60 minutes a day to go to a group exercise class just allows you for that 60 minutes to really forget about your job stress, to really detach from all of that and just focus on this healthy activity. You can also find an opportunity for social interaction and can just be a fun and enjoyable activity. All four of these ways that exercise can help with stress and anxiety, they are not all mutually exclusive, and they might not all be true for every single person. So every person, an individual, and how they handle stress and anxiety is unique. And in that case, also how people respond to exercise is also very unique and individual. Some individuals might respond better to one of the four. some, all of them, some none. So it's really very individual basis, but these are the 4 primary ways that researchers observe that individuals respond to exercise. Last we get into depression. And this is kind of, again, almost the apex of our stress, anxiety, and depression scale. So sadness is a regular emotion due to situations. It comes and goes without significantly affecting our daily life. We might be sad because we watched a sad movie, or we had to say goodbye to a loved one, or, you know, sadness can come in a range of different situations. But our bodies are very resilient. Our bodies like to be in homeostasis, so we work to get back to normal. Depression is an actual diagnosable mood disorder, which significantly impacts daily life by causing severe symptoms that affect how you feel, think, handle daily activities such as sleeping, eating, or working. The key thing is to be diagnosed with depression. Symptoms must be present for every day for at least 2 weeks. And unfortunately, it's one of the most common mental disorders in the United States. Depression itself is a very, very intricate state. And researchers, still don't have a very clear-cut explanation of what causes depression. In part, that's because it's caused by a combination of genetic, biological, environmental, and psychological factors. So there is no clear-cut answer about what causes depression. Again, every single individual is unique. Every individual has their own genetic makeup, their own biological makeup. They live in unique environments. So it's very hard to tease out. However, some really common risk factors that have been observed are having a personal or family history of depression. So that's that genetic predisposition. Having a major life change, trauma, or stress that just supersedes your body's ability to handle that. And also certain physical illnesses or medications that can really affect your brain's neurotransmitter levels, which you want to have pretty regulated neurotransmitter levels to keep your mood state steady, but some medications or illnesses have been shown to affect those levels, which can cause depression. And the physiological underpinnings of depression, again, very not clear, no clear-cut answer, but some of the most primary ones that researchers tend to study are the functional and structural changes in brain structures. So again, having an actual physical trauma or even with aging can change the structure of your brain, and that in and of itself can contribute to depression. Molecular processes within the brain. So when your hormones and neurotransmitter levels are disrupted, our normal levels become not normal, and they disrupt these regular feedback loops that our bodies have inbuilt to control our stress response. That is contribute to, contribute to depression. And also genetic and stress vulnerabilities. So sometimes people might just be genetically predisposed to depression, and you might have 2 people who are genetically predisposed. One person might never actually be depressed because they might not experience situations that trigger this, whereas this other person, they might experience a stressful situation that triggers these vulnerabilities. So exercise can help with depression many of the same ways as it does for stress and anxiety. Exercise is a healthy coping behavior, provides social contact, can improve self-esteem and confidence, can upregulate those feel-good brain chemicals, and just contribute to overall brain health. So we talked about exercise affecting brain structure and function, or excuse me, depression affecting brain structure and function. And exercise itself has also been shown to positively change the structure and function of the brain, especially some key regions that do contribute to our mood and our cognitive processes. So researchers have also compared exercise versus traditional therapies that people might typically experience when they're diagnosed with depression, such as medications or psychotherapy. And some researchers found that exercise may be as effective for reducing symptoms of depression as antidepressants or psychotherapy. And it is more effective for treating depression than experiencing no depression. Sorry, my watch is going off here. So again, overall, if you are experiencing depression, I cannot emphasize enough, talk to a trained medical professional to find what will be the best therapy for your depression. But just know that exercise can be an option, and in a way, it's better than nothing. Okay, so how can you use exercise to help with mental health? key takeaway I want everyone to take away with this talk is any exercise is good for you. Any exercise, any physical activity that makes you happy, that brings you joy, that you look forward to participating in is great. Exercise and mental health research has traditionally focused on aerobic exercise. That's really just the most common type of exercise that is researched. That's why there is the most literature on it. That's why you might see that the most commonly reported in news outlets. However, mindfulness exercise such as yoga, tai chi, meditation, or resistance exercise can also offer different benefits as well. Studies have found that people reported feeling calmer after 20 to 30-minute bouts of just aerobic exercise. This calming effect can last for several hours after exercise. Overall, recommendations for exercise to improve mental health are in line with the current CDC exercise recommendations, which are to exercise in moderate, vigorous intensity physical activity for 150 minutes per week of moderate intensity activity. That's typically activity where you can talk a few words in short sentences, but overall are really hard to hold a consistent conversation, or 75 minutes per week of vigorous intensity activity. That's where it's really hard intensity to say, you can only say a few words before you're out of breath, and it's hard to even talk, or a combination of both. But like I said, I want to emphasize right now these recommendations exist of the aerobic exercise because that's really just the most historically researched type of exercise. And seeing the way the trends in exercise research are going now, I wouldn't be surprised if in the next couple of years, there are some solid evidence-backed recommendations for more mindfulness and resistance-based exercises as well to help with mood. So some general tips to start exercising. If you've been motivated by this or ready to kickstart your exercise program, key thing is to find forms of exercise that are fun or enjoyable. There are so many different types of exercise and options that there is no right or wrong answer. So anything that you look forward to doing and participating in is good. When you start exercising, the key thing is you want to start with small daily goals and aim for daily consistency rather than perfect workouts. So frequency is important. So as with any goal setting, when you start out something, you don't want to just shoot straight for the top. You don't want to go from not running at all to I'm going to run a marathon by the end of the year. That's not doing yourself much favors. So just start with small goals and be consistent. You don't have to have a perfect workout every single day. Not every single workout you do has to be your best. But just reward yourself for getting out there, for moving, and rewarding your body for that. That's what's important. The 5 by 30 minute rule is a great kind of rule of thumb to go by. To jog, walk, bike, dance 3 to 5 times a week for 30 minutes. And 30 minutes is a big chunk of time to fit into your day. Break up the exercise into 2 10 to 15 minute sessions. You can do a 15-minute session before you go to work, one at lunch, or you can do one after work, so you can break it up. The CDC used to have recommendations where bouts of physical activity used to only count if they were done in bouts of 10 minutes. But largely they've removed that from the recommendation. So now the physical activity recommendations are just do anything for any amount of time, can add up to the recommendation, 150 minutes per week. One thing, if exercising isn't something that you really enjoy or like to experience, there are so many options to distract yourself these days during exercise with an iPod, other portable media player, listen to audiobooks, podcasts, and music. I love personally doing long runs and listening to podcasts. There are thousands upon thousands of different things, or music, or if you have a gym on the treadmill, elliptical, you can watch movies. So these days and age, we're very, very, very lucky, I think, to have more distractions for during exercise. You can recruit an exercise buddy. So this is a great way to make it more fun, and it makes it easier to stick with your exercise routine when you have a committed buddy. It can be a work colleague, it can be your spouse, your children even. Just having someone to hold you accountable and enjoy the exercise with. And lastly, the key thing is be patient with yourself when you start an exercise program. Research has shown that it might take about 4 to 8 weeks to really feel coordinated and sufficiently in shape so that the exercise feels easier. So this really goes all along lines of making small daily goals, aiming for consistency, because as with any new hobby or activity, or behavior. It does take time to get into a habit of doing it. It takes time to maybe find enjoyment in it or find ways that you can do it and that you enjoy and are sustained. So the key thing is just be patient. And I wanted to end this talk here with just some different resources about exercise and mental health. So these are some 2 really great podcasts that you can listen to learn a little bit more about exercise and health. Some books, if you're interested in learning more about this: How Exercise Benefits Depression, Anxiety, and Stress, Using Physical Activity to Improve Your Mental Health with Easy Ways to Start Exercising, and Spark. And also some websites too. These are from national organizations that also have some really, really good resources. Again, if you're interested to learn more about the science behind anxiety, depression, and overall mental health, and how exercise and different lifestyle behaviors can be used to help with those. And so that concludes the presentation for today. Looks like we are up to over 10 minutes. So we have, looks like good amount of time for questions if anyone has any.
Thanks, Emily, for a wonderful presentation. Do we have any questions for Emily? You can put them in the chat or you can unmute if you have a question. Do we have any people that are really already exercising, or do we have some people that really want to change their behavior and actually start exercising or doing something different? Or what do you really enjoy doing exercise, your exercise routine? What do you really enjoy?
I started actively walking on both of my morning and afternoon break and on my lunch break. And I started also really paying more attention to what I was packing for lunch and breakfast. I started this in February and I lost 15 pounds. I feel a lot better, and whether I have a partner now or not, that's become my routine. So that's what I do every day.
That's awesome to hear. And I think Stacey also brings a really good point too about how our bodies are so intertwined, and our bodies, there's no one factor. While exercise is great too, diet and our social contact and our other lifestyle behaviors are all so intertwined that, really targeting just one behavior, while it's great, sometimes targeting more than one behaviors can really provide the best results. I see there was a question in here about suggestions for how to help with stress on your stomach. I'm not 100% sure, are you talking about, if the question is like when you're feeling stressed about why your stomach doesn't feel good? Or like, but I would say, regardless, I think, so one of the key things, and actually I have it in my notes here, which I didn't get a chance to mention. Let me see if I can put actually in my notes real quick. So I don't know if you can see this in my notes or not, but so a lot of times, for example, when people are stressed, we associate ulcers with stress. The holes in our stomach, and stress itself does not increase the acid production in the stomach nor cause stomach ulcers, because again, ulcers are caused by caused by disruption in our stomach's acidity levels, disrupting our stomach's homeostasis and causing holes. So stomach ulcers are actually caused by bacterial infections. And that just overall, when we're stressed, these ulcers that we have might become more bothersome. So while I'm not extremely well versed specifically in the body's stress response to the stomach, I do know that either stress can just exacerbate kind of pre-existing conditions that might be in the stomach. A lot of times too, it has been found that stress itself, what our stomachs don't feel very good when we're stressed because of diet related things. So just because you start to eat more poor. And then also too, again, I cannot emphasize enough how important that brain gut connection is. And I really think that in general, feeling stressed, our brain tells our stomach that we're stressed, and it really does disrupt our body's digestion and nutrient absorption. And that's really what causes that upset stomach. Stretching awareness how I tighten my loving all these conversations here. Excellent. I take hula hoop classes now. That is awesome. I've never heard of hula hoop class, but that is so cool. Meditation helps with stress, and meditation is actually, since that got brought up, another area of research, which actually my advisor here, Dr. Neha Gote, she does a lot of yoga meditation research, and that's really kind of this up and coming area, that mind body exercise research, because for those of you that have meditated, or even if you've never meditated, you might be aware of what meditation consists of, which consists of, lying, oftentimes lying down, not moving, not doing anything, just thinking. And while that's not actually physically exerting, so it's not activating our body's stress responses the way, going for a run or hula hooping might do, we do tend to see kind of largely the same effects on our brain, and it can really improve the brain structure and function. So research is currently going on now about, well, how does that work? Obviously it's not changing the brain the same way that aerobic exercise does, but we're seeing some of the same inputs. So definitely keep your eyes out, I think, in the near future for more meditation research, because that's really gaining traction. I definitely recommend that as well.
Well, thanks so much, Emily. We really appreciate all of this. I know the research field is exciting. We know exercise is extremely important, and we want to encourage people to add it to their day in any way they can. And I'm sure some of you are already doing that, which is great, but it's nice to see the science behind it and know that there's going to be more research on mindfulness, which we actually talked about last Tuesday. We will have a presentation next Tuesday. Our topic will be actually chemicals in the environment and how they affect the brain as well. And I think it's an extremely interesting topic, one that you will want to learn about. And again, thank you so much, Emily, for taking time out of your busy schedule. It's nice to see that we have young people that are working on their PhDs and doing some really important research for us. I also want to thank CCE in Delaware and Orange County and the Delaware County Rural Healthcare Alliance for sponsoring this program, and for everyone that took time out today to actually join us. It's only an hour, but it's really nice to see that there's some wonderful things happening in the field of self-care, and we can actually share all of this information with others that we are working with to encourage them to exercise and take care of themselves. Makes a difference, right? So thanks again, everyone, for joining us. We're almost right at the time. So we've been together for an hour. Have a wonderful day, and we'll look forward to seeing you next Tuesday. Thank you, Emily.
Bye. Thank you so much.
Bye.